Howdy and welcome back. Today we're going to be jumping into Game Maker and working on having an element of parallax or the simulation of movement by having objects in the background move differently in relation to the player. So this is going to involve a lot of time with sprites. I spent way too much time here, but I have created 4 sprites in my case. You can make as many sprites as you want. At minimum, I'll probably say 2, just to have something going on in the background, make it more interesting. I made 4 different ones, but it's because, again, my theme that I am going for. So first, I have 4 items. I've got Jupiter, Mars, and Earth. And I also made a star field with asteroids. Having made all of this and already thrown this in here, we only have to address creating stuff in the room and modifying our camera. So let's first address the room. Over here, we're actually going to be making multiple background layers. Each of the different items that you want in relation to the movement will be thrown in a background layer. So first, I'm going to add a background layer over here. And I'm going to rename this to Starfield. Okay. I'm going to modify this background to be black. Since, of course, I want everything that is not interactive to just be black. The star field is going to actually have a sprite. It is going to have my star field sprite. See, by default, it only fills up that corner given the entire room. We, of course, wanted to take up more than just that little corner. So that's why we have to go down here in the properties. And I want it to tile horizontally. That'll cross over that way and vertically. So now the star field is just repeating itself across the canvas. The bigger your thing is, your sprite is, the less obvious it'll be that it's repeating. Depending on how good you are in art, you can have a perfectly repeating setup where part of it is like overflowing into the next part. That is beyond my artistic abilities. So this is what we've got. But it works, it gets the job done, and I personally am very proud of it. Y'all can ask me more in class about the process for making this, but we now have one background. Now, if we're to play the game, run through it, we'll see that the background stays static, nothing too impressive. Let me lower this a bit. It gets the job done. However, we want to have that element of parallax. We want to look like it is moving. So if we jump into our testing room and we move it, nothing is particularly special other than you see the little stars in the background moving. Or not moving, but they're present. And we jump into the other room and it's boring. Now, I'm going to jump into our camera object and I'm going to, in the step event, let's scroll down to here. So again, in the camera object, after we've updated everything, I am going to add in the parallax effect. Inside here, we're going to specify, I want to have the X layer move for our star field. And specifically, I wanted to move for every X that the camera is moving, I want, actually, let's see, yeah, 1.5 scaling. And so for every X that we move, it is 1.5 for the field. So now when we run this, you'll notice that the stars are not purely static. They kind of move with the player. And of course, I'm in the wrong room. Testing room is where we're playing around with. Doesn't notice it if we're moving in the Y direction. There we go. So you see, it looks like the stars are kind of moving in a different orientation in relation to how the platform and the world is moving. And so it just adds a certain coolness factor to it. But by itself, it is interesting. But once we add additional items into the world, it adds a greater effect. Now, if you have like a forest or an outdoors area, you can put trees and mountains and whatnot. The mountains would be further away and trees would be closer. Maybe you're in a city, and so you have the current street you're on moving along, but then in the background you see the skyscrapers and whatnot, or whatever theme that you have. You can layer those in your own way. But for me, since I have the space theme, I'm going to add in Earth. And rename Mars. And one last one, Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is simply going to have the sprite there. And I'm just going to manually move it over about like 500 pixels. Yeah, that looks good. And drop to maybe 50 pixels. Good enough. Mars is going to have the Mars sprite. Where is it? Right here. Doesn't matter what we do here because we'll note it in a second. And then over in the Earth sprite, I will select Earth. So now we have everything set up. Actually, the order is backwards. The stars are on top because they're supposed to be the closest, is what I'm doing. Then Earth is the next closest to us. Then it's Mars, and then Jupiter. The closest thing to the player will be, of course, if the player is at this level in that order. That's how you can think of it. And the darkness of space is all the way in the background. Okay. Now that we have that set up, let's go back to our camera object and add in other modifications for the other layers. So I'm going to modify Earth and Mars. So I want the stars to move the most whenever I move, but I want that movement to be a lot smaller. And so for every 1.5 steps we take, it moves 1. For every 3 steps we take, Earth will move 1. And for every 6 steps we take, Mars will move 1 pixel. Now you'll see them moving at slightly different paces. And so let's build that up. And jump back into our testing room. And we see Earth is kind of following along with us a little bit more. Actually lose sight of it. Let me go ahead and modify that. Let's go to Mars. I'm going to drop this 200 pixels. Earth, I'm going to drop 300. No, sorry, I did 3,000. There we go. And maybe Jupiter is going to be dropped 150. There, good enough. Maybe just 100. Looks fine. Or actually, maybe drop this 300 and have this near the bottom. Okay. 350. Good enough. Again, you play around with these numbers. And so for Earth and Mars, and since these are modifying the parallax in the X direction, putting anything here is meaningless because it's set to be in relation to our X value. You can only modify the Y value in this state. Jupiter, which is just slapped in the background, it is not moving at all. We can specify the X and Y value and it'll be exactly that. Nothing's going to change it. So I want Jupiter to stay static and not moving. The star field, which I have as being the closest thing to us, because I have it tiled out, we don't have any proper movement with it. It's just there. And so there's no need for X or Y offset to be modified. Then if you do want to shift it over, let's say I want Earth to be closer towards the middle rather than starting here, rather than modifying it in this location, I'm going to go down to our camera again. And Earth is going to be 300 pixels over plus this modification. I want Mars to be, let's see, 100 pixels over plus that modification. Now, when we run it, it'll be in slightly different positions, ideally in better positions to make it more clear of this effect. But you now have this cool simulation of movement of the background. All right, we're here and I start moving. See, Earth is kind of following us a lot more than Mars is, but Mars is moving. Jupiter, of course, is not moving at all, and you can very clearly tell that the stars are moving. You can tell Mars is moving in relation to its ice caps to the edge of Jupiter. You can see that's going on. And eventually we get away from it. The stars, however, continue moving until we jump into this room and I fell off the map. But you've got that cool effect. And so if you want to have more of a depth perception, try to have two tiled layers. In my case, because I couldn't really think of anything else to put in the background, maybe I could break up the star field and have stars and then asteroids independent of each other and have both of those be closer parallax, so you can see that the asteroids are closer than the stars. But that can add more of a simulation of depth, despite the fact that this is all 2D. And this is just a fun little way to, in my case, to show the distance between the different bodies from our viewpoint. But this is just a cool effect that you can do, referred to as parallax. But that's all you need to do. Work on some sprites, figure out what you want to do. Maybe you want all of your stuff to move. You just have tiled items and that's fine. Maybe you only have one thing in the background. Maybe you want to have multiple bodies like this, but with no tiled item. That's perfectly fine. And then don't forget to actually just have a background of some solid color just to fill in the void in the back. But whatever you'd like to do, however you'd like to set it up, again, the way I have it is Jupiter is a static background sprite, not moving at all. Mars and Earth have the parallax effect. The star field is tiled horizontal and vertically. It's just repeating the same pattern. And it also has a parallax effect. And then we modified the camera and just specified for the X value of that layer, of these specific layers, for every 1.5 steps we take, it moves that much, or 1. For every 3 steps we take, it moves 1. For every 6 steps we take, it moves 1. And then if you want to shift over in the case of Earth and Mars, since they're individual things, not tiled stuff, I wanted to move them a bit more so that way they can kind of be more involved in the horizontal movement of the game. But that's all we've got for today. If you've got any questions or need any assistance, just let me know in class. Otherwise, everyone have a good one, and I will see you all next time.